The sun rose over Dry Creek like a verdict, slow, certain, burning gold against the gallows silhouette. Dust drifted in the still air, clinging to boots, to skin, to breath. Beneath the creak of the hanging rope, a woman stood barefoot on the platform, her wrists bound with fraying hemp. Her name was Eloise Hartley, though the town now only called her witch. She did not blink as the sheriff unrolled the parchment. She did not plead. Her black hair hung wild around her shoulders, tangled as if combed by wind, and her eyes held that strange, unnerving calm of someone who had lived with exile long enough to wear it like a shawl. The crowd gathered below with a thirst, not for justice, but for something simpler, to see shame strung up and silenced. They didn't remember how she'd come to Dry Creek with a letter in her hand and hope tucked beneath her corset. She had arrived one July afternoon, stepping down from the stagecoach with a spine too straight and eyes too knowing. Boaz McCrae had waited there by the fence, thick-necked, soft in the belly, arms like carved stone. He had been her intended, a mail-order match arranged in the hush of her hometown parlor, her father long dead and her mother fading with consumption. She took one look at Boaz and knew he would never love her softness nor suffer her mind. So she stood before the watching town and said, "No, just that, and nothing more." The silence afterward had a shape. Cold. Final. Even the horses turned away. It was her younger sister, Clara, who came a month later. 17, obedient, dull-eyed with sweetness. She offered herself instead, and Boaz accepted without a word. The town, which had spit on Eloise's shadow, opened itself to Clara with pie crusts and patchwork and Sunday invitations. Eloise, meanwhile, was given the broken chicken coop on the edge of town behind the old tannery. She fixed it up herself, took in injured animals, grew rosemary and mint and black elder. Children came with splinters and fevers. She never turned them away. Women came too, with whispers and weeping, clutching bellies or bruises. She never asked questions, just brewed tea and kept their secrets. Still, they called her unnatural, said she looked sideways at storms and walked barefoot too often. They said her hands were too clean for someone so poor. Then the animals began dying. A cow foamed at the mouth and dropped beside the well. A child fell sick and lingered in fever for days. A stillbirth shook the Coyle ranch, and that's when the whispers turned into torches. It was Mrs. Lavinia Coyle who stood on the church steps, bonnet pressed flat against her hair, voice sharp as broken glass. She cursed my land. She cursed my baby. That woman carries death in her bones. No one questioned how quickly the mob formed. Sheriff Cutter, rigid in his war coat, arrested Eloise that night. They dragged her from her shack while the fireflies blinked dumbly in the grass. She was silent even then, as they tied her hands and set her home ablaze. Her eyes never left the stars. That was 3 nights ago. Now, in a wooden cell that stank of old tobacco and sweat, Eloise sat with her knees drawn to her chest, eyes closed, lips moving in some rhythm only she could hear. The morning light came in soft through the bars, painting her in amber and dust. The door creaked. Clara entered, small and shaken. She carried a cloth-wrapped bundle, bread, probably, or something equally futile. "They won't listen to me," Clara whispered, setting the bundle down untouched. "I've begged them. I've told them you never meant harm." Eloise looked up slowly. Her eyes weren't pleading, just tired. She said, "Is Junie still afraid of thunder?" Clara blinked. "She hides under the bed. Tell her thunder is just angels bowling. The smallest one always wins." Clara's throat caught. "Please just tell them you're sorry. Pretend if you have to. Sheriff says if you confess, they might spare. I won't lie to save their pride." Eloise said, soft as breath. "They want a monster. Let them make one." Clara trembled, then turned to go. "At the door," she paused. "Boaz hasn't said a word about you. Not once." Eloise only smiled, a slight thing, as if that wound had long since scarred over. By midday, the town square was stirring. Word had spread like prairie fire. Execution at dawn. Boys clambered onto barrels for better views. Old men sharpened gossip like knives. The noose hung like a question over the town's righteousness. and then distant hooves. A child on the hill saw him first. A rider, dark against the blinding blue. Black coat, black horse, the wind dragging dust behind like smoke. As he neared, folks squinted. A few gasped. Boaz McCrae, someone muttered, then frowned. No, he's too lean. But it was him. Changed. The softness was gone from him now. His coat hung heavy like it remembered blood. A long scar pulled at his jaw, and his eyes. His eyes were the same ones Eloise had met long ago, only hollowed, shaped by fire and silence. He rode into town without speaking. Didn't nod, didn't tether his horse. Just climbed off slow and stood before the jail. "Where is she?" he asked Sheriff Cutter. The sheriff squinted. "This ain't your concern anymore." Boaz looked past him through the bars, where Eloise sat unmoving in the cell. He didn't smile, didn't move. "She once saved me," he said, voice rough as gravel. "When I was bleeding in that canyon, after them men shot me and left me for coyotes. She cleaned the wound, sat up all night humming. Didn't ask who I'd killed." The sheriff's jaw clenched. "That don't make her innocent." "No," Boaz said, "just human." Behind the bars, Eloise finally opened her eyes. And for the first time in months, they held something more than resignation. They held recognition. Dawn broke without apology. Light poured across the gallows like spilled milk over wrought wood, softening nothing. The town of Dry Creek, dressed in its finest scorn, gathered once more. Fathers lifted sons on his shoulders. Women clutched parasols and clucked. The rope hung ready, braided thick, its fray newly singed from fear and pride. Eloise Hartley stood at the platform's edge, her hands tied again, ankles dusted with the path she walked to her death. Her dress, gray and thin, fluttered in the breeze as if it too wanted to leave her. But she stood still, unshivering, eyes not bowed but cast far over the crowd, towards something unseen. The sky, maybe, or a memory. Sheriff Cutter cleared his throat and stepped forward. "This woman," he began, raising his voice above murmurs, "has brought confusion, misfortune, and wickedness to our town. She's not one of us. She has refused mercy. She has." "She gave it," came a voice from the crowd. Stillness dropped like an axe. Heads turned. Boaz McCrae stepped forward, his shadow long and sharp. He no longer resembled the man who had once waited by the rail fence with hope stitched into his too small vest. He looked carved now, all hollows and history, like the side of a weathered mountain that had seen flood and fire and stood anyway. "I said," he continued, "she gave mercy, when I didn't deserve it." Sheriff Cutter's lips thinned. "This ain't about the past, Boaz." "It's all past," Boaz said. "Every breath we take is built on it, and hers ain't been wrong." He looked up at Eloise, met her gaze. Her eyes held him like open flame, fierce, flickering, dangerous to lean too close to. "I know what it is to be feared," he said, "to have your name scraped raw in saloons and prayer circles. I know the look in a man's eyes before he decides you're less than him. I saw it in mine once." The silence trembled, fragile as frost. Eloise did not speak, but her lips moved slightly, shaping something only she could hear. A prayer, or maybe just the name of the wind. Clara moved then, parting the crowd like a breath through tall wheat. She clutched her daughter's hand, small Junie with freckles on her cheeks and her father's brown stare. Clara looked thinner than before, the edge of guilt sewn into every line of her dress. She walked with purpose, but it was quiet, trembling beneath the weight of shame that was never hers to carry. She stood beside the sheriff and turned to the crowd. "You all know me," she began. "I never raised my voice. I married the man she couldn't. I did what you all expected." A murmur of approval stirred. She raised her hand. "But that doesn't mean she was wrong." Mrs. Coyle gasped like she'd been struck. Clara's voice steadied. "She left because she knew she wouldn't be loved for who she was. Because she wouldn't pretend. She healed your children. She helped your wives when you turned from them. And you hated her because she made you feel small." "No one hated her," someone muttered. Clara's eyes found them. "You burned her house," she said simply. "And you didn't look away when they tied her hands." Junie tugged on her skirt. Clara bent. The girl reached out with her tiny hand and held it up, toward Eloise. Eloise, still on the platform, blinked. Her throat moved, slow and dry. She stepped down. No one stopped her. No one moved. She knelt before Junie, knees in the dirt, and took that small hand into her own. The whole town watched in silence as the child placed something in her palm, a dandelion, already gone to seed. Its softness trembled in the morning air. Sheriff Cutter shifted. He cleared his throat again, but didn't speak. The rope above the gallows swung slightly, catching the light like a serpent of gold. Then Boaz stepped forward, unbuckling his gun belt. It hit the dirt with a soft thud. "If this town still thinks she should die," he said, "then take me first." His words weren't loud, but they landed heavy. A woman gasped. Someone dropped a hat. Sheriff Cutter looked at Boaz, at Eloise, at the crowd. His hand twitched near the brim of his hat, then slowly dropped. "No one's dying today," he muttered. "Not for ghosts." He turned away, and just like that, the crowd began to ripple, unsure how to end what they'd come for. There were no cheers, just slow, uncertain dispersal, like smoke after gunfire. Mrs. Coyle's jaw clenched as she passed. She said nothing, but her eyes spat fire. Boaz bent to pick up his gun belt, but didn't put it back on. He turned to Eloise. She hadn't stood yet. She was still kneeling, hand wrapped around the dandelion stem, like it might teach her something if she held it long enough. He didn't speak. He didn't touch her. But when she stood, he offered her his hand, not in possession, not in pity, simply as a way forward. Her fingers hovered, uncertain, then curled around his. They walked past the gallows together, not speaking, not rushed. Clara watched them go with tears sliding silently down her face. By the edge of town, where dry grass danced in the wind and the sky turned the color of faded denim, Boaz paused. "I got a place out west," he said, "near water, wild but quiet." Eloise didn't ask why he was telling her this. She knew. "And if I don't?" she asked. He shrugged. "Then I ride slow." She looked at the land beyond, then back toward the town that had named her a witch, then back again. Her silence wasn't hesitation. It was choice. "I won't ride behind you," she said. Boaz nodded once. "Side by side, then." And that's how they left. Not with a kiss, not with a cheer, but with footsteps pressed side by side into the dust, slow and steady as forgiveness. Later, in the empty square, a child found the dandelion where Eloise had dropped it. It had blown apart, its seeds scattered on the wind, heading in 100 directions. Each one carried something soft, something wild, and maybe, just maybe, something new.